The morning light filtered through the kitchen window as she stood there, blinking twice before speaking. Her tone carried an air of practiced confidence, like she was setting up the perfect punchline. "Maybe you'll finally apologize," she said, as if this were just another casual exchange between us. But it wasn't casual, not even close. We hadn't spoken in 33 days, not a word, not a cough, not even a mumbled greeting. I was holding a plate of scrambled eggs when she broke the silence, and my hands began to shake. Slowly, deliberately, I set the plate down. It wasn't for dramatic effect. I simply didn't trust myself not to drop it. She wore the robe, the silk one with sunflowers that seemed stitched with her sense of power and allure. She only brought it out on days she wanted to feel untouchable. I stared at her, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then I spoke, my voice steady but sharp. "Sorry I didn't divorce you sooner." Those were the first words I'd said to her in over a month, and they landed exactly how I intended, like a slap across the face. For once, she had no comeback, no smirk, no clever retort, just silence. The kind of silence that hums louder than any argument ever could. I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just done. Done with her silent tantrums. Done with the way she turned stillness into a weapon. Done guessing whether she'd slam doors or ignore me until I felt like I didn't exist. 33 days of being erased, like some half-finished sketch smudged away bit by bit. And now, after all that, she wanted an apology? Let me take you back, not far, just 4 Thursdays ago. It started with something so small, so absurdly trivial, that it almost feels laughable now. A smoothie. She left it in the fridge, neon green, unlabeled, and I drank it. I was running late, and it seemed harmless enough. Big mistake. When she found the empty glass in the sink that evening, she didn't yell. She didn't scream or throw accusations. Instead, she looked at it, raised an eyebrow as though marking my fate, and walked upstairs without a word. That night, she slept in her office. The next morning came, and with it, silence. At first, I thought it was a joke, a dramatic little protest meant to make me squirm. Days passed, then a week, then 2. What started as awkward tension morphed into something else entirely. Terror. She moved through the house like I wasn't there, playing music, making breakfast, laughing during phone calls with her sister. Meanwhile, I became a ghost in our shared life. Half-full dishwashers sat untouched, clothes piled up in the laundry room. Every unspoken gesture screamed the same message. You're the side character now. You don't realize how deafening silence can be until it's all you hear. I tried everything to break it. Made her favorite dinner, cleaned the garage, left a note saying we should talk or yell or something. She threw the note away without reading it. And then, 33 days later, she appeared in the kitchen, tilting her head like royalty addressing a subject who'd forgotten their place. "Maybe you'll finally apologize." I did apologize, but not for what she expected. My words hung in the air, heavy and final. And in that moment, everything began to unravel. That night, sleep eluded me. Not because I felt guilty, not because I regretted what I'd said, but because I knew Dana wasn't finished. She wasn't the type to lose control of a conversation without fighting to reclaim it. After 33 days of emotional neglect, I finally confronted her. The silence that followed wasn't the usual kind. It was heavy, charged. Her eyes didn't blink, and her fingers tightened on the counter's edge, as though she wanted to throw her smoothie at me, but couldn't decide if I was worth the mess. She didn't say a word. Instead, she turned, her robe billowing behind her like some dramatic character in a slow-burn film, and walked upstairs. I didn't follow. I didn't apologize. Instead, I went to the guest room, not to sleep, but to think. For the first time in ages, I craved answers more than peace. They say curiosity killed the cat, but that night, curiosity obliterated what little remained of my denial. I opened her laptop. Let me be clear, I'm not proud of it. I've never been the snooping type. I'm the guy who still knocks before entering a closed bathroom, even when I'm home alone. But something about the way she looked at me, dismissed me like an insect under glass, made me need to know why. Why the silence? Why the venom over a smoothie? Why the rehearsed tone of triumph when she finally spoke? Her browser was still open, and there it was. A Google Doc titled Boundary Plan for Separation. My hands began to shake. I almost closed it, but didn't. It wasn't a plan for separation. It was a list of talking points, cold and calculated, formatted like a corporate memo. 1. Withhold affection until leverage is regained. 2. Make him feel unstable, unsure of where things stand. 3. Mention therapy but don't follow through. Keep him hopeful. 4. Keep backup options warm. J is still interested. 5. Apology must come first. If not, next phase begins. I read it twice, then a third time. My wife hadn't just been upset. She was orchestrating psychological warfare. She had phases. I scrolled further. There were fragments of chat logs pasted into the document, conversations with someone named Mila, her best friend. Lines like, "He's still trying. It's sad. I think I could make him beg if I drag this another week. He wants to be sorry. He just doesn't know for what. That's the sweet spot." I felt nauseous. I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a controlled experiment. And the worst part? I'd been sorry. For weeks, I thought I'd done something wrong. I blamed myself. I second-guessed every word I said. I walked on eggshells, thinking I was preserving peace, when in reality, I was nothing more than a lab rat in her game of emotional chess. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that escapes your throat when reality shatters the illusion you've been living under. The kind you let out when you realize the person sleeping beside you has been plotting your psychological unraveling with bullet points and footnotes. The next morning, when she walked into the kitchen with that smug tone and said, "Maybe you'll finally apologize," I gave her one. It was the last thing she expected. That morning, I hadn't intended to confront her. There was no grand plan, no carefully crafted speech prepared in my mind. But after stumbling upon that Google Doc, a cold, calculated list outlining boundaries and strategies for our separation, something inside me fractured. Not a sudden explosion, but a slow, deep crack spreading through the foundation of everything I thought we had built together. For years, I'd been walking on eggshells around Dana's moods, believing I was being supportive, patient, steady. In reality, I was just easy to manipulate. The next day, as I walked into the kitchen and saw her standing there in her robe, calmly pouring her kale smoothie like nothing was wrong, I didn't hesitate. I slid her laptop across the counter toward her. She didn't flinch. Instead, she looked up at me slowly, as if I'd handed her something trivial, like a napkin. "What's this?" she asked, her tone light, almost indifferent. "Open it," I replied. When she didn't move, I opened it myself. The document was already queued up. Silence filled the room as she began to read. For the first 10 seconds, her expression remained blank. Then I noticed it, the faint twitch of her eyebrow, the subtle swallow in her throat. She knew exactly what she was looking at. "You went through my computer," she said finally, her voice calm but accusatory. That was her focus, not the content of the document, not the lists detailing how emotionally clumsy I supposedly was, or her plans to keep me at arm's length until I broke down. No, she was upset that I dared to look. I didn't raise my voice or hurl insults. I simply said, "You planned this. You were preparing to ignore me until I fell apart." This wasn't about hurt feelings, it was practice. She closed the laptop with deliberate calm and pushed it back toward me as though dismissing an unwanted menu. "Everyone writes things when they're angry," she said dismissively. "You're being dramatic." Dramatic? As if my reaction to being systematically starved of emotional connection for over a month was excessive, as if I were some lab rat in one of her psychological experiments. "You called me sad," I reminded her. I turned to Mila, who stood nearby, and quoted her words verbatim. "You said I looked like I was shrinking, that I'd beg soon, that it was the sweet spot." At that moment, she blinked hard, just once, and took a step back. The atmosphere shifted. She hadn't expected me to have read the entire document. Clearly, she assumed I'd only skimmed it. She hadn't realized I'd seen every chat, every bullet point, every tactic mapped out, as though I were an opponent in a chess game. Then, without missing a beat, she switched tactics entirely, flipping her tone like someone turning off a light when they smell smoke. "Look, I didn't mean most of it," she said quickly. "It was frustration. I was venting. You always play the victim, Levi. You make things heavier than they are." I nodded slowly, letting the weight of her words settle between us. In that moment, I understood everything I needed to know. She didn't deny any of it. She didn't apologize. She didn't care. And that's when it hit me. I would never receive an apology because in her world, she had done nothing wrong. In her eyes, I was the problem, the unfinished project requiring correction and reprogramming. I wasn't her partner. I was something to be fixed. With that realization sinking in, I reached into the drawer, pulled out the folder she didn't know I'd compiled, and placed it silently on the table. The envelope contained divorce papers. She didn't touch them, but her smile vanished the moment she saw it. When I placed the documents on the table, I braced myself for anything, a scream, tears, or even outright denial. But what happened next was something I never anticipated. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. Instead, she negotiated. Dana stared at the folder as though it were a misplaced receipt for an item she barely remembered purchasing. No fear, no sorrow, just cold calculation. "This is impulsive," she finally said, her tone measured. "Not unfair, not wrong, just impulsive." As if my decision to end our marriage was akin to ordering the wrong coffee at a cafe. She didn't even bother opening the folder. "You're emotional right now. You need to think this through." "I already did," I replied, "for 33 days. She walked over to the sink, calmly rinsed out her smoothie glass, and leaned against the counter as though we were discussing refinancing a mortgage. "We can fix this, Levi, but not like this. You always escalate things when they get uncomfortable." I almost laughed. Me escalating? For weeks, I'd been emotionally starved, questioning whether I even existed in her eyes within our own home. Yet here she was, once again, framing me as the irrational one. This wasn't discomfort, it was punishment. "I read what you wrote," I said. "You enjoyed it." That's when her composure cracked, for just a second. Not guilt, not regret, just a flicker of surprise that I hadn't folded into her version of reality. Finally, she opened the folder and scanned the papers as though reviewing a grocery list. "You didn't file yet," she noted flatly. "It's just a draft." I stepped closer, not in anger, but with resolve. I met with the attorney 2 days ago. If you want to contest anything, that's your choice, but this is moving forward. Dana tilted her head slightly, reassessing me as though I'd suddenly become an opponent worth considering. "So you're really doing this?" she asked, "over silence you didn't even think would bother you this much." Her words hit me like a delayed slap. She knew. She knew how distant we'd grown, how cruel her behavior had been, and still she framed it as a trivial issue I should have ignored. Her manipulation wasn't subtle anymore. It was blatant, deliberate, almost proud. I nodded slowly. "You're right. You didn't think it would bother me, and that's exactly why I'm leaving." Something shifted behind her eyes. Not panic, not sadness, but frustration. Dana wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing control over the story. If I left like this, she couldn't twist it. She couldn't label me as unstable, unfaithful, or erratic. I was calm, measured, and she hated it. "You won't find better, Levi," she said, her voice low and cutting. "You're too sensitive. No one else will put up with that." And there it was, her final gambit. No begging, no charm, just a chilling reminder that she viewed me as disposable, a man who should feel grateful anyone deigned to tolerate him. I took a deep breath, picked up the folder, and responded, "Then I'll stop being tolerated." As I turned toward the door, she called after me, "You'll be back." But I didn't look back. You lack the courage to be alone. But as I shut the door behind me, it hit me. I had been alone for a very long time. 3 days after leaving, she appeared in the parking lot of my workplace. I was sitting in my car, eating a microwaved burrito with the windows slightly open and a podcast faintly playing through my phone's speaker, when her reflection caught my eye in the mirror. Gone was that sunflower robe, replaced by a gray coat I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, the one she never wore because it made her feel ordinary. Suddenly, ordinary suited her just fine. She didn't knock on the window. She simply stood there, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on mine, like she expected me to roll down the glass and let her back into my life. I eventually did, but not out of longing for her presence. I needed to hear what new version of reality she was peddling this time. "You've made your point," she said, before even stepping fully into the shadow of my car. "So now what?" No apology, no plea for dialogue, just "so now what?" As though my departure were nothing more than a childish tantrum, and she'd come to check if I'd finished sulking. For the first time in ages, I really looked at her. She wasn't sad or scared. She was amused. That half smile crept onto her face again, the one she wore whenever she thought herself smarter than everyone else in the room. I replied, "You should have received the email by now." She didn't flinch. "So, you're serious?" "I was serious when I begged for a conversation," I said. "You just didn't care until you lost your audience." She rolled her eyes and sighed dramatically. "Levi, you're blowing this up because you didn't understand how boundaries work. I wasn't ignoring you. I was resetting expectations." "No," I corrected her. "You were testing how long it would take to break me. You wanted to see how far you could stretch the silence before I cracked. Well, I didn't. You did." That smug smile faltered briefly before returning colder than before, and then she dropped the act. The real reason she'd come surfaced. "Are you going to move the money back into the joint account, or should I start calling lawyers?" There it was. Not love, not reconciliation, leverage. After filing, I'd transferred most of our shared savings into a separate account. It was legally mine. I'd been the sole earner, and I had proof. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. And she'd noticed. "You had a plan, Dana," I said calmly. "I finally made one too." That's when she realized she'd miscalculated. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't trying to grab her attention anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was exhausted. She shifted tactics once more, faster this time. Look, maybe we both took things too far. We don't have to make this ugly. You're not built for ugly, Levi. You hate conflict. She wasn't wrong. I did hate conflict. For years, I'd twisted myself into knots to keep the peace. But watching her seamlessly blend manipulation with feigned kindness made something click inside me. I hadn't been avoiding conflict. I'd been absorbing it. "You're right," I said. "I hate conflict. I finally decided it's time to stop letting that thing masquerade in my house, wearing my wife's face." She stared at me. No more smiles, no negotiation, just silence. For once, the quiet was mine to own. After the ambush in the parking lot, I thought Dana was done. No texts, no calls, no emails. It seemed like she was accepting the divorce. I didn't feel good or relieved, but something akin to clarity, as if my brain had been submerged underwater for years and had finally broken the surface. I started sleeping better, eating real meals instead of surviving on crackers and anxiety, and even laughing at dumb TV shows without guilt clawing its way up my throat. It wasn't an exciting kind of peace, just a quiet one. And I appreciated quiet now, the real kind. Then my mother called. It was just past 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was folding laundry in silence, phone propped up on my sock drawer, lo-fi beats playing softly when it rang. Seeing her name didn't alarm me. What did alarm me was her first sentence. "Levi, I just got off the phone with Dana." I froze completely, arms mid-fold. The socks crumpled in my hand felt glued together by some invisible force. I said nothing, just braced myself for what I knew was coming. "She said you've been spiraling," my mom continued, gently, carefully, as though afraid of breaking something already cracked. "That you're pushing her away, that she's afraid for your mental health." My throat tightened. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "She told you what?" I finally managed to ask. "She said you weren't sleeping, that you were making rash financial decisions, that she's trying to protect you but you're lashing out. She mentioned finding notes, Levi. Is any of that true?" I almost laughed. Notes? Sure, I'd been journaling, but not the way Dana was spinning it. Until that moment, I hadn't realized how far she was willing to go to keep herself cast as the victim. Slow emotional neglect doesn't make for juicy gossip, so she must have rewritten her story into something tighter, more sensational. Here was my own mother tiptoeing around the idea that I might be unstable. "Mom," I said slowly, "she's trying to get ahead of this. She knows what I found. She knows what she wrote. Now she's painting me as the bad guy before I can even explain what happened." There was a long pause, long enough that I wondered which side of the battlefield my mom would choose. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know it was this bad." But her voice was too calm, too composed. "Exactly," I replied. "Dana hadn't just manipulated me. She'd started circling the people closest to me like a wolf stalking the herd, not to attack them, but to warn them. Warn them about the wounded animal I supposedly was becoming. Not so they'd run, but so they'd stay away from me." That night, I opened my old texts with Dana. I scrolled through months-old messages, searching for answers hidden between the lines. There were subtle signs, little comments here and there. Phrases like, "You always overreact," or "Your memory seems off again." At the time, I dismissed them as harmless remarks, but now they seemed like pieces of a carefully constructed puzzle she'd been assembling for years. She wasn't trying to win me back. She was ensuring that even if she lost me, she still controlled the narrative.
By the end of the week, I had shared the truth with everyone close to me. None of the sugar-coated version, just the raw reality. I laid it all out, the silent treatment, the manipulation tactics, the false concern about my mental health. My friends were livid on my behalf.
My coworkers didn't say much, but their expressions shifted, as though they finally understood why I'd seemed so drained for so long. The toughest conversation, though, was with my sister, Mara. Mara and Elena, the woman I once called my wife, used to be inseparable. They had this bond that felt almost too tight, sharing inside jokes I never understood. I used to think it was a good thing that my wife and sister got along so well. Now I wasn't so sure. So when Mara called out of the blue and said, "We need to talk face to face," I knew something was up. We met at a small diner downtown, one of those places with dim lighting, sticky tables, and menus that look like they hadn't been updated since the 90s. I hadn't even touched my fries before she leaned in, her voice low and urgent, like we were planning something covert. "She came to see me," Mara said. "Elena?" I asked, stunned. Mara nodded. "Last night, she showed up at my place with wine and this sob story about how you're falling apart. She said she's terrified you'll do something drastic." Mara paused, her expression heavy. "She cried, Theo, real tears. She even mentioned she's worried you might hurt yourself." That last part hit me like a punch to the gut. "She's using you," I murmured. "I know that now," Mara replied with a sigh. "But for a moment, Theo, I believed her. For a moment, I thought maybe she was right." That admission shook me more than anything Elena had done. If my own sister, one of the people who knew me best, could doubt my stability after a single conversation, then Elena had planted seeds far deeper than I'd realized. "She doesn't want you back," Mara continued. "She wants to rewrite history. She doesn't want to be the one who ruined the relationship. She wants to be the victim, the one who let you go because she had no other choice." I sat back, struck by how perfectly Mara had captured it. That was exactly what Elena was doing. The truth didn't matter to her, only the story people would remember. She cared more about preserving her image than confronting the reality of her actions. "She asked me to talk to you," Mara added, "to convince you to come home. She thought if I explained things from her perspective, you'd calm down." I glanced out the diner window, then back at my sister. "Are you here to do that?" "No," she said firmly. "I'm here to tell you I'm sorry I ever doubted you or took her side. And if you need me in court, I'll show them every text she sent me." Every single one. I hadn't expected that, not from Mara. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The weight of half-truths and distorted narratives no longer felt like a maze I was trapped in alone. Returning to my temporary apartment, I noticed a voicemail waiting. It was Dana, her tone eerily calm. "You're making a mess, Levi," she said, "dragging people into things they don't understand. I tried handling this quietly, but you clearly want an audience. Remember, once it goes public, you can't control what others believe." She still thought she could manipulate the situation, treating it like one of her games. Exactly 1 month later, I received a letter, handwritten on plain paper, folded without an envelope, slipped under my door late at night, evading the security camera. It was brief, unsigned, but unmistakably her handwriting. "You were right. I went too far. I mistook control for care. I thought silence would make you chase me. I didn't expect you to walk away and never look back." Reading it twice, I smiled. Not out of forgiveness or longing, but because it was the first time she admitted the truth. Not the fabricated version she presented to others, not the sugar-coated lies she fed my sister or mom. Just raw honesty delivered in quiet defeat. But I didn't respond. By then, the pain had shifted. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about proving her wrong or making her feel what I'd endured. I wasn't chasing closure. I was the closure. That weekend, I packed up the last of my belongings. My lawyer confirmed the divorce would finalize by month's end. No contest. Dana didn't fight it. Perhaps she couldn't, not with the evidence we had documented. She'd run out of moves, while I began reclaiming myself. I started taking morning walks again, real ones, free from distractions. No podcasts, no overthinking, just breathing, pavement, and sunlight. I reconnected with old friends, accepted invitations I'd normally decline, and even signed up for a cooking class despite my tendency to burn toast. This wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was authentic. A quietness settled within me, not the suffocating silence of hurt, but the soothing kind that heals. Dana's story with me had ended long before I said goodbye. I simply hadn't realized it until now. Looking back, I'm grateful, not for her actions, but for how they pushed me to confront truths I'd avoided. Sometimes apologies never come, but if you're fortunate, the life you deserve emerges instead. Which moment resonated most? Was it the raw admission in the letter, the realization of moving forward, or the quiet strength found in healing? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your reflections and similar experiences. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe and pass it along to someone who might need a reminder that healing begins when you stop waiting and take the first step forward. You've been watching a space where honesty takes center stage, and every tale carries the power to inspire change. Real stories, raw emotions, and the courage to face what matters most. This is where vulnerability becomes strength. Your journey doesn't have to be walked alone. Share these moments with others who understand the weight of letting go and the beauty of moving on. Every shared story is a thread in the tapestry of connection, reminding us all that we're never truly isolated in our struggles. So don't hesitate, reach out, reflect, and allow yourself the grace to heal. Together, we can create a ripple effect of hope and resilience. Thank you for being part of this community, where every voice matters and every truth has its place. Stay tuned for more stories that remind us of the power of authenticity and the courage it takes to embrace life fully. Remember, healing isn't linear, but every step counts. Let's keep growing, learning, and supporting one another as we navigate the complexities of the human experience. Stay connected, stay inspired, and know that your presence here makes a difference. Until next time, take care and keep believing in the strength within you to rewrite your story and find peace. This is a safe space for truth, growth, and transformation, where every confession finds its place in the light.